Hi, I'm Joe Sawyer, the Superintendent of the Shrewsbury Public Schools, and welcome to another episode of Superintendent's Update. Our topic today is the exciting Beal School Building Project that is potentially going to come to fruition in the near future. My guests today are Sandy Fryc, who's a member of the school committee, Kevin Mizikar, who's our town manager, and Patrick Collins, who's the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations for our public school district. All of us are also members of the Beal Building Committee, and we thought it would be a good idea to provide the community with an update as to where we stand with the project and what's coming up. Again, this is work that's been happening for a couple of years, and we're just finished the schematic design phase and submitted that to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, who will hopefully be our partner on this project. Really, there's some key reasons why this has come forward. I think it's pretty obvious that the Beal Building, which is almost 100 years old, is coming to the end of its useful life as a school. The community's received tremendous value from that over time in a whole variety of permutations. It was originally a high school, then it served different grade levels, and since the late 1980s has been an early childhood center for the town, and it needs to be replaced. But beyond that, we also have too many kids and not enough space at the elementary level across the board, and this project would create relief for enrollment where we have crowding and situations where we don't have equitable learning spaces across all of our elementary schools. And then finally, it's an opportunity to partner with the state to get a very significant amount of funding towards the project rather than Shrewsbury taxpayers carrying the whole thing on their own. So for all those reasons, we think it's a strong project and one that will be of great benefit to the town. And at this point, I'll ask each of you to speak to one aspect of it, and starting with Patrick. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about the idea of the Beal building itself and where we stand with that, and
Sure.
the need we have for not only that, but to start moving beyond just a one-to-one replacement of the Beal School.
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's important to remind folks that partnering with the MSBA is really important to provide that external financing source to get these school projects done. And they run an annual so-called competitive application process. So they open up a period of time where you can submit to partner with them on a project. They do that on an annual basis. And in Shrewsbury, the school committee and the Board of Selectmen voted in the spring of 2015 to submit a so-called statement of interest. And that's the application process with MSBA. During that application period, there were 96 different applications for new schools or major addition renovations, or so-called core projects, 96. And because of the relatively poor condition of the Beal School and its age and its need and our need for space, we were one of 26 communities to be invited into that pipeline. So about a quarter of the applications were accepted, and we were fortunate to be one of those. And again, that's based upon the facility condition, and there's still some pieces of that 96-year-old facility that are original equipment. So we were invited into eligibility period in the spring of 2016. And as we go through this presentation, and talk about timeline, and if we're successful in opening up a building in the fall of 2021, you think about what it takes to build a public school in Massachusetts. That's a 6.5-year period of planning, application, local financing. So it's quite a long time period. But there's great need there, and also part of the process, and we are through that schematic design phase. Early on, it's a requirement of that process to evaluate your existing facility and what it would take in terms of upgrade to bring it up to current codes. And so that was done by our project team, Lamro Pagano Associates, and our project management team, and with cost estimating. Just to bring that building up to code would be an estimated $15.6 million. And that would not solve our space problem. That would not replace foundations or exterior to any significant degree. It would just be kind of covering code issues. So the old expression, don't throw good money after bad, if you will, kind of resonates with a lot of people when they hear that $15.6 million just to bring it up to code. That really doesn't make sense. So that option was dismissed early on by both MSBA and the building committee. So That's why we're on to a new school project, and we not only need a new facility, because this is at the end of its useful life, but we need additional space. So that's kind of where we're at with the facility condition and a little bit of the back history with how fortunate we are to be invited into this pipeline by MSBA, a couple of years ago.
Right, and I think that when people I've spoken with, they clearly get the idea this is a very old school building that is coming to the end of its useful life, needs to be replaced. But then the idea of building a school that's much larger than Beal and what the need is for that. It's very important to note that this is a partnership with the MSBA, and they want us to be sure that we're building a school that's large enough for what their investment's going to be. And they, based on information we provided as well as their own information, they set the enrollment at 790 students. The school committee about a year ago made the decision. They had an option to keep it. We had to look at two options per the MSBA regulations: keep it the same grade span, or change the grade span to match other schools within the district. And ultimately, after some research and some recommendations, the school committee decided to make this a K-4 elementary school, and make all of our elementary schools in Shrewsbury K-4. 3 of them already are: Coolidge and Patton and Spring Street. Floral Street has not had K, and the Ks for Floral have always been at Beal. But under this plan, all the elementary schools would become K-4. There'd be consistency across the program, geographically across the town, and felt that fewer transitions between buildings. There were some positives to that the school committee saw and approved that. So that's been the design moving forward is K-4. But there really is some real benefits in terms of equity across the entire town, across the elementary program. Right now, we have differences across the schools where some of these schools were built prior to the need for certain specific special education programs, or the state requirements for education of English language learners and so forth. Or just the growth for the need for regular core classrooms has squeezed out some of the specialty programs where we don't have a dedicated music room or a dedicated art room in some of our elementary schools. And under this plan, should the new school be approved and be built, all of our K-4 schools would have sufficient space for special education programming, English language learner programming, music, art, in their own dedicated spaces, which of course educationally is highly desirable. Lamro Pagano Associates has worked closely with us based on our educational program to put forward a design that we think will work really well. It's very similar to successful designs in the past at both Floral Street School and the more recent Sherwood Middle School. And we're very excited about the functionality of this design and how that will benefit us, and also what happens for the other schools as well.
I think just to take off on that for a minute, and I think there is a bit of a misconception around the so-called Beal School Project, because people might think it's just for kindergarten age kids or something like that. If they're not tuned into all these conversations, which are hard to follow when you have a busy life. But if you have elementary age students or going to have them, this project will positively benefit your children because of those spaces that you just mentioned will be provided in all of our elementary schools. So this is a K-4 solution that benefits all elementary children, not just kindergarten age.
And then, and we'll show this slide on the screen as we're discussing it, and we shared this slide with the school committee recently, this idea of too many students and not enough space. If you look at the blue line on the graph, you can see how the elementary population, of course, was going up very rapidly during the late 90s, early 2000s. It leveled off somewhat, but it is going to be moving up again. There's future enrollment growth that we need to absorb across our elementary system, and adding this school will enable us to do that. And that's important in terms of that projected growth into the future, as well as the equity of space across the district. The other benefit that we've had over time a huge amount of demand for is the ability to provide full-day kindergarten to all of our students. That's something that we have not been able to do in recent years because we just don't have the space. And this is something that the statistic is that upwards of 95% of full-day kindergarten students across Massachusetts in public schools in Massachusetts go to a full-day program. We have to limit ours by lottery, and that's something that educationally in 2018 and beyond is really something that it's essentially an expectation that districts have full-day programming for their kindergartners, and that's something that we will be able to achieve as a result of the additional space. So for those reasons, all the shortages in space we've had, including the fact that we've had Floral Street students housed at Beal for first grade going on almost 2 decades, just because Floral Street quickly outgrew its building when it was built in 1997. So for all those reasons, that space crunch will be addressed by this investment in our K-4 program. So, of course, for a project this size, it's very difficult for a local community to take that on their own. And I'm hoping, Sandy, you can speak to how the investment by the Mass School Building Authority helps us, what that means for the community, and how you perceive that from your role as a school committee member.
I think it's really important for people in the community to understand this whole funding mechanism and how Shrewsbury partners with the Massachusetts School Building Authority to fund such a large capital project. And we talked about the size. It's a 790 student K through 4 elementary school. And it was established not just by what Shrewsbury thought, it was using MSBA guidelines as well for enrollment projections, our enrollment projections, in order to ensure that we have the right size project so that we address current needs, space needs, and enrollment for now into the future. And at that point, we have to look at, if it's approved by the voters, the project cost, thank goodness, is shared by the state of Massachusetts through the MSBA as well as the town of Shrewsbury. Currently, the reimbursement to the town is estimated to be about $33 million. It would be the reimbursement to the community. So it's a significant amount of money that we would get from the state. And at this point, if the voters said no, we have a vote on November 4th. If the voters say no, the town will no longer be partnering with the MSBA. We would be out of that process. And we should also remind people, this is the second time that we are in the pipeline for the Beal School. At the school committees, we determined back in 2014 when we were looking at an operational override to take it out of that pipeline. And I think if it is turned down in November, we will not have a third chance back. There are many deserving districts and communities that have buildings that will probably be put before us. And it would then fall on us, as Pat said, it was $15.6 million that we would need just to bring up to code. It would not fix the space needs. It wouldn't fix anything other than building code issues, and the entire portion of that would be on the community if they desire to do that. So personally, and from the school committee's perspective, this is a very fiscally responsible project. It meets current and future needs of the school district, and it takes advantage of significant dollars coming from the state, which I don't think is something that should be turned down. If we can get it done at this point, we should really move forward with that.
And construction costs are expected to continue to rise over time, and that's something that factors in as well. So, and speaking of costs, asking Kevin to give a sense of what the financing would be like, in terms of the costs, and how that would be addressed by the town if the town meeting were to authorize the borrowing, and ultimately the voters at the election in November would approve a debt exclusion. How that would all work. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So as Sandy mentioned, with the MSBA's reimbursement of $33 million, the town's portion of that will be $59 million. So we have to find the best way to bring that debt service onto the books and minimize the tax rate impact, and also I think make a prudent judgment on how much interest we should incur for this project over time. And often those two things work against each other, right? We can level lower the tax rate impact, but we're going to pay a lot more money over time. And so we've been looking at a number of models, and I was thinking about it today. Unfortunately, we know Hurricane Florence is headed towards the East Coast, and then I looked at my Beal graphs and I see a similar version of some spaghetti strings there on the screen as they look at those models. And in some ways, that's what we're doing. We're looking at all the different ways that we can fund this project and trying to find the one that strikes the right balance between the tax rate impact and the total interest that we'll pay over a 20 or 25 year period. So in using that philosophy to minimize the impact and not pay any more interest than we have to, we're also challenged at this time by kind of the rising interest rate and this Federal Reserve Bank that sets the long-term interest rate, and that projection of it going up. So I think whenever I initially looked at this project and Patrick and I had some conversations, it seemed like it would have been smart to kind of pay as you go and borrow as you go several times over the course of the project. But now some of our models are indicating that it would make sense to probably borrow the funding sooner rather than later to stave off some of those increases in the interest rate. And we've developed those models, and what it looks like, it's a huge project, a $95 million project. And with that MSBA reimbursement, we can really get this cost down to taxpayers to have a tax rate impact at the worst case scenario of about 96 cents on the tax rate, somewhere between 78 and 96, depending on one of the two final models that we're working on. But to the average single family tax payer here within the community, that means less than a $400 impact, somewhere around $380 a year in the peak year if we do a level principal payment, which would be have the highest peak. The two scenarios that we really looked at is, should we have a level principal payment over a 20-year term or a level payment like a mortgage? Both have their benefits and challenges related to them. But I am happy to see those numbers only around $380 for the average single-family home in the worst-case scenario in the worst year of the project. Right now, that looks like it would be fiscal year 2021, so still a number of years in advance. And the other benefit that we get because of running the debt service models like we have in the past is that we'll retire some debt between now and then, about 18 more cents. So. It's not like we're going to add, 80 to 96 cents on the rate, from what it is now till then. Well, 20 cents or so will fall off the tax rate, and then we'll layer this on as we go forward to help minimize that impact. So, on the best case scenario that I think we can look at, the number's more around $310 per household, but I want folks to think about that in the range, because we're going to stick to our philosophy to find the model and the timing to access the market whenever it impacts the tax rate the least, and we can find a responsible amount of interest to pay over the course of time. So that does fall somewhere between $310 per home and $380 per home in the worst year. So. Again, as the rest of the debt service schedule plays out, we will be retiring those other debts and get the benefit of that. So, I'm excited about this project. I know the numbers are still big, but I think they're quite manageable. We're certainly not hitting the peak of our debt service schedule in the past few years, so this is a good time to layer some additional capital on, which we'll always have to do as a community if we want to invest in ourselves.
Right, and I think that's important. We always will have infrastructure that needs to be either replaced or improved, and looking at it, I think this is a really thoughtful approach that you're taking for the community to see. We're looking at all avenues of funding and what's the best for the community going forward. It's very helpful for us as we look at this as a good project.
Well, if you think about value in terms of, again, with the MSBA's participation, if that weren't to happen, and the question then is, well, are we going to build a new school all on our own? And that's going to be a much more significant tax impact, of course, absent the $33 million or so that the state would be providing. Or do you then try to do something where you're trying to invest dollars in an obsolete building that would not be, in my opinion, a good use of the taxpayers' dollars in terms of value? And we really have been fortunate to some degree in that the community, which of course has grown incredibly since the mid-1990s, there have been multiple investments in school infrastructure. And if you go back to when I arrived in Shrewsbury in 1997 when Floral Street School opened, Floral Street School has paid off. We have not made a significant investment in our elementary level despite the growth that we had beyond Floral Street. And that's something we needed to make investments in the high school. And then the renovation of the former high school into Oak Middle School, ultimately Parker Road Preschool, and then, of course, most recently Sherwood Middle School. And when you were speaking earlier about the need to right-size this project, and I think we can probably show a slide that demonstrates this that we shared with the school committee at one point, or Leonardo Pagano did. The high school, Oak, Sherwood, Floral Street, those are all a significant percentage over their design capacity. That's right. I mean, it's manageable right now, and we're making it work, but we don't want to make a mistake and undersize this building And the bottom line is MSBA won't let us. I mean,
Right.
the 790 student design capacity is what MSBA is saying. If you want us to invest our money, you need to have a long-term solution to this project. Patrick, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the key dates coming up this
Sure.
fall.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. These next couple of months, really the next 7-8 weeks it's all coming to a head here. So the building committee has decided to allow for the community to have another look through the current Beal School, if they wish, on September 24th. So we'll open that up to tours at 6 p.m. at Beal School on September 24th. People want to walk around, see the current building. We're happy to show them that. And then we'll have a building committee meeting there at 7 p.m. And there will be an opportunity for public input to the building committee as well at that particular meeting in September. Following that, in October 22nd is the special town meeting to approve taking on the debt. We need a 2/3 vote at special town meeting to move forward with that. And then we hope to have that in hand when we go up to the Mass School Building Authority on October 31st, Halloween. And we're hoping for a treat, not a trick, but from MSBA. But the MSBA board will be voting on October 31st to enter into a formal agreement, a contract with us, a project scope and budget agreement. And that's where we formalize all of these commitments around reimbursement rate and funding. And having that special town meeting approval in hand will certainly help us a lot. And then finally, it all kind of culminates on November 6th at the election. And maybe we should talk about how the ballots work there. I don't know if, Kevin, if you want to talk about that a little bit, about the ballots and ballot question. But that's on November 6th, and we need a majority, simple majority for that.
So November 6th, everyone should go out and vote. It's a state biennial election, and there's a lot on the ballot and a lot of political activity, but we'll also have a separate ballot that residents will receive when they come in the door, and it will be one simple question. Basically, it says, shall the town be authorized to raise taxes a sufficient amount on an annual basis for the life of this project to cover the debt service? So it's really excluding those tax dollars from the provisions of the other aspect of the tax rate in Proposition 2.5. It's a simple yes/no question. There will be a mailer that goes out to the community with what does a yes vote mean, what does a no vote mean, at least 10 days in advance of the election. And what's called the fair and concise summary of the project with the total cost and the MSBA reimbursement. So that'll get mailed out at least 10 days in advance. So folks should have time to review that. We've had some slides up here this evening on the financial aspects of the project, but there's additional slides that are on the Beal Committee's webpage. And anyone that wants to talk spaghetti models, I'm happy to do that within the office as well, and try to answer any questions. There's a lot of moving parts in the financing of these projects, and I'm happy to sit with folks and try to explain how it works and what we can and can't do, and when we can and can't do it.
Oh, and I think it's important to really say there's going to be 2 documents the poll workers
That's
will
right.
hand. I think it's different than many times we go to vote, we get one thing to vote, and the poll workers will automatically give
That's correct.
the 2 documents. So people have the election and then the override.
That's right, yep.
Very good. So I think the last key point that we really haven't discussed is, and I've been receiving really positive feedback about the location of where the new school, Beal School will be built, which is at the former Glavin Center on Lake Street, just south of Route 9. And it's where many people know Glavin Center was there for many years, which was a state facility for adults with disabilities. And then there's also the soccer fields that Shrewsbury Soccer has used for a long time, as well as the agricultural land on the other side of the street. And that is something that we're very fortunate. Representative Hannah Kane, Senator Michael Moore were able to get legislation through this last session that has been signed by Governor Baker that allows that parcel to be conveyed to the town of Shrewsbury and to be able to acquire that for the purposes of municipal use for the school, as well as youth soccer, being able to continue to use it in agricultural leasing. It's a wonderful location in terms of being geographically central, which is important as we look at where our growth has been and how we divide up the population once a new school comes online, hopefully. And in addition to that, it is overlooking the soccer fields. It's in a location that both for building, but once it's there, it's going to be, I think, a really excellent community use parcel. And in thinking about the master plan, which I know you served in the master plan committee, it really does, it should really enhance our holdings in terms of municipal land and school department land. And our philosophy has always been to try to utilize our facilities for the benefit of the community beyond the educational use whenever we can. Another gymnasium, we're always looking for gymnasium space for different, especially during basketball season. More field space, the ability to have meetings and media center, library, and the cafeteria and so forth. So it really should benefit the whole community as well as our educational needs. But it really is a terrific location for a school, and that's something that, after looking at many, many sites, was narrowed down to that being the best fit for our needs for a building of this size and for its function.
And I've heard the similar feedback, Joe, about the location, and I know we have a slide too of the schematic design from kind of an aerial view that we'll show as part of this show, and also people are excited about the straightening out of Lake Street.
Absolutely.
So we all know it's a very kind of windy road right at that particular point right now. So as part of the project costs that we just talked about and the financing, it would not only straighten out the road, but take some of the top off so that there's better lines of sight entering and exiting that facility. So that's another aspect that has been incorporated in here. It will be a really good fix for safety purposes.
Yeah, another real benefit for the whole community, which is terrific. So I appreciate the feedback and the conversation. Again, we're at a point where we know we have an almost 100-year-old school that's coming to the end of its useful life that we need to replace. We have a longstanding issue that's only going to get more pressure in terms of enrollment over time. Too many kids, not enough space across the K-4 level. This project would solve that in a way that there's a real opportunity for a partnership with the state, where the state is willing to, we believe, invest $33 million in this project if we're willing to invest on our side of the equation and really address our space needs and our educational needs for a long-term solution, which is really would be beneficial, we think, to not only the schools but to the community at large. Thank you. Again, appreciate you watching. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Superintendent's Update. And if you have questions about the Beal Building Project, please feel free to reach out to Town Manager Kevin Mizikar, myself, Joe Sawyer, the Superintendent of Schools, the School Committee, Patrick Collins, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, or anyone associated with the Beal Building Committee. Thanks very much for watching, and we appreciate your support.